sci-fi, the unexplainable, paranormal, conspiracies, and much more. Starring your host and co-host, Jenny Nicasio, Sean Kelly, and Jason Sledgehammer I. Petro. Brought to you by UPRN Network. Now for your host, Jenny Nicasio.
Good evening and welcome to Chasing Prophecy on FM 105.3 New Orleans, where we discuss anything and everything beyond the scope of normal. Remember to like us on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. Hello, boys.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm okay.
What a rough day today. What a rough day.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that was a pretty good day for me, other than just taking a nap. No, I didn't take any naps now. So why is it such a rough day for you, Sean?
Well, because, I work at a grocery store, right? Shop and Save, I'll say, here in Pittsburgh. And I had more dumb questions from customers today that I could deal with in a lifetime. It just seemed like every 5-10 minutes, someone would come up with the most stupidest questions.
Okay, give us an example of a stupid question. I want to hear this.
What do we got from the Pittsburghers here?
Here's what we got. Okay. So, and this happened to me back at John Nagel's. This thing follows me. Well, a girl bought a whole ham, right? Today, bought a whole ham, and she said, "Can you cut it down the middle?" I said, "Sure, not a problem." And as I was walking back to the meat room, okay, she says, excuse me, do you think you can get me a slice out of the ham in the middle?" I said, "Sure, not a problem at all." So as I turn around and I start walking back, on my father's grave, the lady said to me, "Does that mean you have to cut it down the middle?"
Whoa.
That was wow. And then I got somebody into an argument today with somebody who knows the difference between a ribeye and a Delmonica. Now let me explain it to our viewers, listeners here. Anything above the Mason-Dixie line, it is considered a Delmonica. Anything below the Mason-Dixie line, it's called a rib steak.
Well,
20 minutes fighting with this woman, knowing that I was like, please. And so those are the two main ones today. But now I'm here.
Well, anything between the 200 square miles of southeastern Massachusetts, I believe, is called the Bridgewater Triangle. I think. Anyways, we have a really cool guest on the show tonight. Christopher, I think I would know this since I'm part Italian. Balzano? Is that how you pronounce his name, Sean?
Balzano.
Okay.
Balzano.
He's a teacher.
Get the hand going.
He's a teacher and a folklorist living in Boston area, and he's going to discuss his book tonight. And he's also been known to be an investigator of the unknown for 12 years. He's a regular on several paranormal radio shows and has also appeared on a documentary that I just watched yesterday that was about the bridge, how you say it? Bridge over troubled water. No, Bridgewater Triangle. Okay, so he is going to be on the show, and like I said, he's appeared on several documentaries and television specials on the supernatural. And for the past 20 years, the people along the Massachusetts-Rhode Island border, okay, that's known as the Bridgewater Triangle. So many odd things have happened. Some people call it the Disney World of the paranormal, because there's so many strange things that happen there. But for centuries before that, the triangle has been a haven for the unexplained. This is going back, way back. Ghosts. There's been scenes of like crazy stuff with animals, wolves, like the dogma and Bigfoot, cryptic creatures. So this is going to be an interesting show. And there's also, I'm not sure how to use the Hockomock
I tried
swamp.
to figure. I couldn't figure
And
that
that's
name
a
out
real
either.
big, that's a big spot. And it's going back to, oh my God, it's going back to, geez, 1675 when there was they lost 500 Englishmen and 3,000 Native Americans, a bloody massacre with, they called it King Philip, with King Philip. And so we got him on the show tonight. So let me go ahead and bring him on without further ado. Thank you for joining us tonight, Christopher.
Hey, how are you tonight?
Hey, Chris.
I thought I had a great hat, but Jenny, you've got my hat totally beat.
Oh, I collect them. I love my hats.
It's
Especially
pretty
this
amazing.
Especially this time of the year. I'm going to get some new ones. I know
Yeah,
there's
we got
some
the hats on one side and then the hats
Spirit
on the other.
Halloween store. There's a really cool one I want to pick up. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Chris, tell us how in the heck did you get involved in this?
Well, actually, you said 12 years. I've been doing this since 1994.
Ooh, okay.
Actually, my 2 Triangle books are now 12 years old, which makes me feel really ridiculously old because it was like what I thought was going to be my heyday, and I guess my heyday never happened. But I actually started, I mean, like a lot of people my age, I always say I was a generation that was raised on going to horror movies with your parents at a drive-in, and you would watch like, The Fox and the Hound, and then The Exorcist would be after it, and you were supposed to be asleep by the time The Exorcist rolled around, but you never were, right? And we were the first generation that were raised on HBO. So when our parents went to sleep, they showed all the best stuff on HBO after dark. Parents would go to sleep, you'd go in there, and you'd see these absolutely horrific horror movies, and it was like, oh my word, like it just awoke something in me. Avid reader, just consume. And then when I went to college, I went to Emerson College in Boston, and excuse me, my dorm was the Charles Gate Hotel, which is one of the most haunted buildings in Boston. And in addition to these crazy, weird experiences we would have, what I started to notice is that people would tell stories about why they were happening, right? All the background stuff. And I would hear the same weird happening, and 3 different people would give me 3 different backstories. But better yet, all of those backstories were things that I had been reading about in books, in Time Life books. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not here. That happened in Chicago. And that story right there, no. I heard that story from Bethesda, Maryland. And I started to realize that we, as normal people, right, whatever that might mean, the paranormal is not, it's not normal for us. It's not something that occurs every day. And when it does happen, and it does happen, we have to process it through some kind of filter. And we process that through folklore, through stories that we know, that are familiar to us, that we can fall back on. And we all kind of know, whether they're campfire stories or whether they're these classic ones that have fairy tales that have kind of changed over time. We hear them, we believe them because we want to make sense of the experience. And so I started documenting not only hauntings, but the stories that revolve around them. And that was my first kind of experience, was my website, Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads, at that intersection between a true haunting and the stories that evolve around it. And since then, happened to be, once again, old guy here, the internet was kind of just waking up. I was one of the first websites to focus just on the state of Massachusetts. And things just kind of went from there.
Cool.
By the way, not in Massachusetts anymore. Unfortunately, I've lived down here in Florida for about 13 years now.
Wow.
So
nice. I was just there.
I am comfortably far enough away from the triangle, although it still seems to get its fingers on me all the time.
What part of Florida are you located in?
I live in Southwest Florida, so if you know Florida, outside Fort Myers.
Okay, I was just down there a couple weeks ago for the first time in my life, and we started off at like Jacksonville, Miami, Key West, Ocala, and stuff like that. It was nice down there. I really liked it.
Actually, the book that I'm working on right now is focused on the Ocala, because the Ocala is the Bridgewater Triangle. It is the Freetown State Forest of Florida, and it actually dwarfs the crazy things that go on in the Freetown State Forest.
Nice. While I was there, I did pick up a book. I got to start reading it. It's like the haunted histories of places in Florida and everything, so I'm really excited, being that I was down there for the first time. I'm excited to, check all that out.
And while you're at it, you're going to get my new book, which is Haunted Florida Love Stories, I hope.
All right.
Oh, really?
All right. Plug. I think you might as well plug things in the beginning. So if people get bored of me and turn you guys off, I've at least got like the book sale in.
Okay. So what got you really interested in the Triangle? I mean, what did anything happen to you that made you go there?
Yes and no. So it's important to understand that the Bridgewater Triangle was coined in the late 70s by Lauren Coleman, codified kind of officially in 1983 in Mysterious America. And the idea, the concept of the Bridgewater Triangle kind of laid dormant. Activity of the Triangle didn't lay dormant, but it kind of was, no one was talking about the Bridgewater Triangle the way they do today necessarily. A book came out in 94 called The New England Ghost Files, which anyone who's from New England who's into ghosts at all will claim this is like one of the best books of all time. It's just a great story, a great book. The author of it happened to live in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, which is one of the apexes of the Triangle. One Halloween, I went out and we decided to legend trip, I guess we would call it now, legend trip as many of the different stories from that book that we can. Now, by that time I had my website, right? So I'd post something about Boston and get a little traction. I'd post something about the Brockton area, get a little traction. I posted about things in Rehoboth, like specifically the redheaded hitchhiker of Route 44. And I would see the hits on my website go through the roof. I would get tons of emails and responses. And so I started saying, what's up with that area? And then I started getting more information about other places in the Triangle. I would post something not Triangle related and get no feedback. I would post something Triangle related, not understanding that there wasn't even a Triangle at this time. And it would just go crazy. And so I started doing research, and in my research, I found the work of Chris Pittman. Okay. And he had kind of connected with, he was more of a cryptid UFO person. I'm more of a ghost person. And he was very much in tune with the Bridgewater Triangle and what was going on. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a minute, I worked with that guy. Chris Pittman and I had worked together for like a year and a half at my sister's sub shop, literally right next to each other, joking with each other all the time, and didn't realize we were both researching the same area. Nice. And both were kind of walking in each other's footsteps without even knowing it. It's funny because I just read, we got to the documentary that Jenny was referring to earlier, got a really bad review the other day. And so the director posted it. So I looked at some of the reviews of the movie, and I find it hilarious that people who are watching a documentary about Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Puckwudgies and ghosts and demons and satanic murders and all this crazy stuff, they couldn't believe that Chris Pittman and I had actually worked with each other. Like, that was the thing that would baffle people's minds. But what happened was literally it was one of those things, like it was birth by fire, I guess. I kept going out there and looking into these stories and publishing them on the website. And by doing that, more people would contact me and more people would get in touch with me. And over time, it just became, my website ended up becoming kind of a repository for Bridgewater Triangle stories until I wrote my first 2 books. Wow.
So you still in contact with Chris? Is he still up there in Massachusetts working the Triangle?
Yeah, well, and maybe we, depending on where we want to go with this conversation, the Bridgewater Triangle has a lasting effect on the people that look into it. Okay. It's something that outsiders are feasting on. I'm not sure if you guys know of the new podcast that's out there called Bridgewater.
No,
never heard of it.
Okay, so we can get into that a little bit later. But the simple question the simple answer to your question is, Chris is active and he's out there sometimes, because investigating and doing what he does has taken such a toll on him physically and psychologically because of his involvement in the Triangle, that he kind of pops his head up every once in a while and then like puts it back down and then pops it up once in a while. And he really is. If the angle of the triangle for you is UFOs and cryptids, he's the man to talk to. And kind of our research, kind of hand in hand, gave a rebirth to the triangle that it's still kind of going through right now. Cool.
I have a question. Going back to the history behind it. So this is similar to, well, this is how I think. This is similar to Skinwalker Ranch, that it's a curse from the Indians because of all the blood that was shed during that 1675. What do you think about that?
The Bridgewater Triangle is an onion. Every time that you think that you have found what causes the activity in the triangle, it totally another layer comes out, right? The rug comes under your feet, and now something new is introduced. So there have been over the years like psychics who have kind of made this connection between King Philip's War. Historians that are into the paranormal also want to make that connection. Of course, if you saw the documentary, there's the wampum belt story that I tell in that documentary. But in reality, I live here in Florida, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at the way that Europeans carved out their little world in America, right? The Spanish conquered, right? The Spanish literally just came in and wiped people out. The English converted, right? They came in, they made friends. Let's do a little trading. Oh, by the way, don't you love Jesus? Now, by the way, I'm not going to trade with you unless you like Jesus. And so it's two very different ways to take over a people, right?
Right.
The absolute bloodshed and the insanity. Mm-hmm. Of the King Philip's War on both sides of the fence. So you have Wampanoag who are committing war crimes against the British who are committing war crimes against the Wampanoag. Doesn't naturally fit either of their personalities. One might say as if they were possessed. So even something, do I think that the King Philip's War added to some of the negative juice that's in that area? Do I think a lot of the ghosts that are in the triangle have to do with actual people who have died during that war? Yes. But I think that the King Philip's War is another symptom of just the absolute darkness that is the Bridgewater Triangle.
So why do you think that there's a lot of things that happen at the swamp? It seems like there's more cryptic creatures that have been seen there.
Well, I think it's, whether it's spirits, and I've been talking a lot lately about our movement of environments, right? And so if we keep carving out every place, then anything that's in that place that's left over, we're intruding on their land, right? Okay. And I'm not even just talking about humans, but I'm talking about fairies, right? So if you believe in fairies, if you believe in fairy rings, fairy trees, things like that. Every time you cut one of those down, they got to run somewhere, right? They got to go somewhere. They're either going to go into your house or they're going to go further in. The Hockomock is a swamp. It is a primeval, primordial nest, right? Mm-hmm. So anything from civilization, from the founding of Massachusetts, from the developing of Massachusetts, is constantly being pushed into that area and pushed into that area. So you have parts of the Hockomock that no one's ever really even been to. You've got parts that, in the last 50, 60 years have been expedited for the first time. And so, they see these gigantic snakes, right? But it's also, Massachusetts is not, it's this interesting combination of city and rural, and suburb becomes very rural very quickly. But there's not a lot of woods left, right? There's not a lot of natural land. And so I think those things which might have roamed free, when Coleman talked about the Bigfoots, for example, he was talking about the three towns of Bridgewater, Bridgewater East, or East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater. Even those places are now more developed than they were when Coleman was there, which is why there's even more activity happening in the Hockomock. So I think when you take that and then you also take in the potential idea of, are there places where these portals, where these kind of splits in, whether it's our universe or a multiverse, happen? Places like the Hockomock Swamp and the Freetown State Forest are prime locations because they're still unsettled. There's still so much land that is not dug into, where in other places there isn't.
Well, how do you explain all these unusual occurrences? Sean, you agree with me, don't you think that it's so similar to Skinwalker Ranch? And
Yes,
It does sound like
very
it, yeah.
much so. Yes.
and Jason, you agree too?
Yeah, something that was on my mind for a second is, Chris was saying, like, down in Florida around Ocala, you're referring to the forest as like a triangle area there. What is it about the triangle? It's fascinating because you have the Bridgewater Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle,
and you have the one in New Mexico that Andy Orn
like,
talked about.
Is there something like? What is it about a triangle? Is it all this crazy activity?
I think it's just think of relationships, right? One person experiencing something, or one place having weird stuff happens. That's alone, right? Two, it's a coincidence. Three, you now have a triangulation, like literally a triangulation, right? That's what it means. In other words, you now have between this spot, and this spot, stuff happen. So I think we naturally want to create these triangles across the world, right? So if we start, I'm here. They say they have a Tampa triangle. It's the weakest triangle I've ever heard of whatsoever. It's like it's like three towns that are right next to each other that all have creepy crap happening, right? Like it's not it. But what I always say is this, and this is where the connection to Skinwalker, Titans, the connection to definitely like the Bennington Triangle, which is in Vermont. The other one you were talking about is that you can look at, it's not just that stories happen within the triangle, it's that triangle stories happen within the triangle.
Oh.
So the classic example I always give is two people are in a bar, they get into an argument, person one shoots person two, 30 years later, person two's ghost appears, and come into my bar, I'll tell you all about it. And have a beer, and I'll tell you about the ghost, and maybe some weird stuff happens. In other words, there's a backstory, right? Mm-hmm. And there's something that can engage. Triangle stories are not like that. Most of the triangle stories only lead to questions, more questions. They defy. Now, of course, we have our big, like the Hockomock. It's a huge place. I have never heard a ghost story from the Hockomock Swamp whatsoever, right? But you hear these unusual cryptid stories and UFO stories in that area. But then you go like a little bit further away, same kind of environment. And I'm not going to name towns, but like if you go like 50 miles to the west, same kind of environment, maybe not quite as swampy, and nothing happens, right? Or you look at a story. One of my favorite stories that's in my first book, Dark Woods, is called The Witch of the Woods.
Okay.
The Witch of the Woods is one of those stories where an entire neighborhood of kids were all experiencing the same horrific dreams and nighttime visitations, right? All of these tween, I guess we would call them tween now, tween boys were all having these dreams where a witch was sexually assaulting them, right? Or like climbing into bed with them. They would have dreams where they would be walking in the woods and come upon her house. The person who contacted me initially about it said that he was so jealous when he got to the house and found out she had a husband. In his dream, this 12-year-old killed her husband, right? Nice. And there were even reports from the neighborhood, like one kid in the neighborhood, the mom busted down the door and found him physically struggling with something that she couldn't see. None of the boys ever talked about it. None of them ever said what they were experiencing, never shared the dream until a few years later when they all started kind of confirming it, right? That's a triangle story. Who the hell is this woman in the woods? She's untraceable. It doesn't make sense. Her foundation there is a foundation of a house back there that this guy showed me to as an adult, right? And it was standing there, and it was very interesting. It was one of the most profound moments in my paranormal world to have this guy standing at this foundation from something that had traumatized him for his entire youth. The reason he went to college outside of Massachusetts and, ditched his family and kind of never came back to the house was because this was so horrific. And he's standing there at this foundation and he's crying, right? A grown man, and he's crying. And I see him finally kind of like getting over it and kind of taking a deep breath and then walking away. And his life has been kind of positive since then. That's the triangle story.
Okay. How far is the witch story to Salem? How far?
Well, if you belong to my family who believe Massachusetts ends at 495, the loop that surrounds it, it's ridiculously far. It's another world. One is Salem is kind of near New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. So like here, and then Freetown is over here near Rhode Island. So they're on opposite ends of the state.
Okay. So wouldn't any be connection to anything over there with the witches?
No, and there was never anything. He called her a witch because she physically looked like what he thought of as a witch. She never did anything in particular that was witchy in his in that world.
She just looked like a witch.
Yeah, like that stereotypical
like hag.
Old woman, long hair. She was wearing a black hat, it seemed. But the interesting about that is that when I was writing Dark Woods, the subtitle of the book, even though my publisher got it wrong on the cover, is Cults, Crime, and the Paranormal in the Freetown State Forest. And it was an exploration of, it started with a question of, is the same thing in Freetown, which is, in my opinion, the heart of the triangle, not just because my book's about it, is the same thing that's causing all of these weird paranormal occurrences and these weird supernatural occurrences. Also the reason why it seems to be a haven for murder and unusual crimes, and all throughout the triangle, higher levels of mental health disorder, higher levels of teen suicide. The Bridgewater State Hospital, which is a mental health facility, skyrocketed in terms of suicides that are committed at that mental health facility compared to anywhere else in the country, are the same things that cause the paranormal parts of things, causing these, I guess we would call them social things or sociological problems that we're having. Yeah. And in doing that, I looked at some crimes, like some crimes that were really kind of big headlines, murders that were big headlines within Freetown, and the existence, 100% existence of some kind of cult in the Freetown State Forest. In doing that, I was tracking small little crimes that were kind of supportive of the big cult, right? Mm-hmm. So Alan Alves, who I quote extensively in the book, who you might have seen the documentary, always says, if you see the cult, you're not really seeing the cult, because the true big, conceptually like moving big things never lets the left hand know what the right hand is doing. So someone does what they're doing and they don't realize that they're working for a bigger picture. So they commit all these other smaller crimes that you see, things like abductions, things like drug trafficking, all this kind of stuff. I was actually able to track the movement of this cult from a similar forest right outside of Salem into Freetown over the late 70s and early 80s. So you could actually see the crime and these, I don't want to say they're paranormally charged crimes, but they're definitely ones that when you look at them, they raise your eyebrows a little bit as being unusual, and having some kind of odd paranormal twist or supernatural twist to them. And I literally am able to track them in that book from the area where Salem is down into the Freetown State Forest.
Yeah, a lot of paranormal investigators call it a vortex.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different
yeah. When I was saying like little places in time, like, portals and stuff like that, vortexes. I think, vortex is a really good, newer catch-all for that stuff, because at some point you have to say, like I was saying, you go back and it was like, okay, so maybe it was the stuff from the 70s that made the triangle. Nope, because that stuff led to this and that stuff. And eventually you have to lead to just a shrug. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on. But the idea of a vortex makes sense because there are things that pop up every once in a while in other parts of the area that are very similar to the triangle, both in physical description and like what happens. And then it goes back to the triangle again. And so you almost get this feeling that not only is that a kind of veil between worlds, but also a veil between one part of our world and another part of our world.
Yeah. Did you ever hear anything about the Dayton Rock? What is that called? The Dayton Rock State Park? Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dayton Rock is, while there have been some odd experiences, it's really kind of just an unusual story within the triangle. So once again, I know Chris Pittman has had paranormal experience at the triangle, but what it really is just an unsolved mystery. Mm-hmm. So there is this huge rock, which was originally in the Taunton River, and it has all of these symbols on it. And no one can exactly figure out what the symbols mean, like what society it comes from, what pre-Columbian society it comes from, except the fact that every society and every background thinks that they have it translated and it's them, right? So especially because the area has such a high concentration of Portuguese, people see Portuguese symbols in the rocks. People see Native American stuff. People compare it to stuff that are on Mayan temples, if that's what. And so it's really this kind of mystery that's lasted all the time. It's now out of the river, and it's in, its kind of like, holding place in like a little house in Dayton. So it's called the Dayton Rock. But it's more than being supernatural, paranormal. It's just one of those things that really scratches your head, and it's a really cool kind of thing to look at and say, because you really can see what does that mean? And this looks like the name Joseph, and this looks like a Chinese symbol I saw on our menu once, and it really has all this crazy stuff that's on it that will probably never be solved because there's so much fighting between the different groups over to what it might actually mean.
Yeah, and they're also saying something about the swamp, that there's the canoe company that some people have seen, the Thunderbird. Mm-hmm. Did you hear anything about that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know nothing about a canoeing company. I just know that traditionally, so they have the Raynham dog track, which I believe now is closed, and right behind the Raynham dog track is, I guess you could call it like the unofficial welcome area of the Hockomock Swamp, because it's the easiest place for you to enter, right? It's actually just rocks and says, do not enter. And you just walk all over the sand and you're there, right? But in that area in particular, there have been sightings like over the dog track and over the woods of the dog track of these gigantic pterodactyl type birds. Right. And people just can't explain it by the mere size of them. Like they actually think they're like low flying jets, like going like up this way. I mean, they're really these unexplained things. I haven't heard of too many Thunderbird kind of sightings in like the last 20 years. I don't know if that's because they've started doing more construction with that area of the triangle as a focal point. Like they're trying to rerun a train through that part.
Yeah,
which the track was originally laid and then it was kind of abandoned, and so now they're trying to relay it to go from essentially the triangle to the Boston area. That's also the same area where they've seen there used to be a lot of demon dog, or these gigantic red-eyed dogs.
That's scary.
And I think that if people went further into the triangle, further into the Hockomock Swamp, they would experience a lot more of that. I think the reason why there's such a high concentration is because it literally is here is gambling, and here is the craziest place in the earth. Like it's right up against the swamp.
Wow.
So there are a lot of people there, so therefore there are a lot of witnesses in that area.
What I find fascinating is the Dalton State Hospital, that they said that there were some people that they've had some satanic, can't say that right, cults. Satanic cults. Yeah. They said they did it. They actually did the ceremonies in the state hospital.
So this is another good example of like what makes the triangle, right? So now, if we're talking 2021, if someone were to come, first of all, if someone were to come to me with triangle stuff, I'd push them off to Chris Pittman or another great person named Andy Lake out in that area, because they're boots on the ground. But before like the publishing of my book, before kind of some of the documentary was made and things like that, people were approaching me with stories, not saying, here's a triangle story, but rather saying, I'm having these weird experiences. So the Taunton State Hospital, which depending on who you are, is impossible to ever get into, or I can frequently get in there. Everyone says they can frequently get in there, and I in my time there, I was never able to get in. But my first teaching job, I'm a teacher. Okay. My first teaching job was in a juvenile delinquent step-down program, right? So these were kids who had committed pretty harsh crimes, who were going from a secure lockup to like a 2-year program to put them back into society, right? A ton of my kids, probably a third of my kids, went through Taunton because as it, Massachusetts it's the original green state, right? They recycle everything. So you have mental health facilities who became tuberculosis hospitals, who became juvenile detention facilities, who became, all this other stuff. And so there's all this energy upon energy upon energy upon energy. I talked to over my 5 years working at this jail, essentially, I talked to over 24 people who did not know each other, right? So we're talking teenagers, criminals, but teenagers who would tell me stories of waking up at night and dark men staring at them from the corner of the room. Right?
Oh, wow.
Many of them, so I'm asking like physical descriptions, but you got to keep in mind, this is like 1999, right? 2000, things like Venom. Some of them described him as looking like Venom because that's what they could produce. Some of them said it was, like right now they would say maybe like, a Slender Man type situation or something like that. They had no vocabulary for it. And I would see these kids who had committed rape. They had committed physical assaults. And they would be almost in tears describing their experiences of being in the room, being able to move. So it's not a night terror, right? Move. And the thing just watching them tilting his head, watching it like go running to the thing, watching figures like that just walk up and down. So I started a little research, and it just happened to be all of these people, once I published about it, started coming out of the woodwork telling me about it, right? And the story goes, and once again, I had kids literally in the most hardcore sections of the suburbs of Boston who were heavily deep into gangs, stay in jail for an additional 2 months rather than go into the basement of Taunton State Hospital. They were that intimidated by it. And the story goes that early on in the days of the hospital, there was a cult that was attached to it. And what would happen is they would bring the most warped out patients, and they would put them through these rituals in the basement. In the basement, I don't know I can't say if it's still to this day, but in the basement up until like the turn of this century, those symbols, there were still unexplained symbols on the wall, burnt marks on the ground. And I actually spoke to one man who went down into the basement, and as he hit the last step, he had what can best be described as a time slip. And he sat there feeling the heat from all of these torches, seeing these people in robes chanting, seeing all of this kind of like these little screams going on and muffled screams. And then he kind of went back and he hit the back of the step with his foot, and everything just kind of disappeared, And so that is kind of the legacy of Taunton State Hospital. Like many of the mental health facilities, and I don't know, where are you guys from? Like, what states are you guys in? Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania.
So I don't know if you guys had been in like the early 2000s, there were a rash of fires in mental health facilities that were being converted, most of them being converted into condos in Massachusetts. So the infamous Danvers State Hospital, which is like the inspiration for the Marston building in Salem's Lot, that burnt. Parts of Taunton burned. Foxborough State Hospital, which is also in the Triangle, burnt. Like all these different places had these mysterious fires that were happening. I'm not sure if you guys experienced that, in your neck of the woods, but it was just this really crazy coincidence that seemed to connect these weird experiences that were happening there.
For the audience, if you have any questions for Chris, I put a link in the chat. You can go ahead and hit the link. Make sure you only hit the audio portion of it, and you can ask if you have any questions or comments for Chris. Chris, I wanted to tell you, I don't know if you know that in 1760, there was it was the very first UFO, documented UFO report in that area. It was directly over the Bridgewater Triangle. It was then in 1908, local papers reported on another UFO sighting. Yeah. And then in 1968, there were several witnesses to a large orb floating in the area. And did you know that this was a hot spot for UFOs too?
Well, I didn't know it when I first started out, but definitely, as I'm getting into that research, because Chris and I were working on so many different things that overlapped each other, right? So people say to me, well, they automatically assume that you're into UFOs, you're into Bigfoot, and I'm like, well, sometimes you can't avoid it, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's the same question of is this uprise in teen suicide connected to the ghost? Well, is that also connected to the reason why there's so many UFO sightings in that area? Now, some of those can be explained because there are kind of like bases in that area. So there's a lot of black helicopters.
Yeah.
When we're talking 1760, there's no helicopters. No. Never mind black helicopters. Never mind unexplained things. So then you get to the next logical thing that people want to say, which is like, well, it's a swamp. It's swamp gas, which I think is one of the great lies of the paranormal world. The swamp gas, which has never really been able to be fully explained and proven to me that these things like ghost lights are only swamp gas being ignited. Because as far as I know, things that are ignited don't tend to dance and like move in and out of each other and play with each other and stuff like that. So people say the UFOs are that. There's a really good story. So obviously, as I'm saying all this, people need to go out and see the documentary. It's free on Amazon Prime. It's posted to YouTube now, so I think you can watch it free on YouTube. They have a really great story about the two news reporters. I don't know if is that the 60s one you're talking about?
I don't recall that.
So there's a really good story in that documentary told about two news reporters who see a UFO in the triangle, and it's so credible because it's two people who have
the 1968. Yeah, was it in 1968?
I can't remember the
1970. Yeah.
And so it's people who, like I said, they have everything to lose by telling their story, and yet they feel compelled to tell it. And then they retell it for this documentary. And it's one of the moments of the triangle because, maybe we're all crazy. Maybe the people I talk to, maybe the people I get my stories from, they've misidentified something, or they're just lunatics or whatever. Like, these are two people who are literally coming back from a story that they, that have just reported on, that see it, that talk about it at the time, and their story's been consistent through the years, and they're still willing to talk about it, despite the fact that everyone thinks they're a loon, or everyone thinks that they're, that there's something wrong with them for saying this.
Yeah. There's so many different stories, and it goes back to that the Indians cursed the land. Just going back to like the Skinwalker. It seems like Indians and a lot of different where there was like Bushy Run battlefield. A lot of people think that the land was cursed too, and just anywhere there's Indians, I believe, and it goes back to poltergeists and all those stories about the land is built, or the houses or the developments were built on a Indian burial ground. And it seems like probably they did curse the land.
I think that the interesting thing, and this goes hand in hand with what I was talking about with the King Philip's War, whereas I don't think it's a good enough explanation for the triangle. And here's the other part of that. Freetown.
Wait a minute, Chris. Do you think it's not cursed? You don't believe that the Indians cursed?
I don't. I think the over the course of history, the Wampanoags have had as much trouble in the triangle as we do today.
Okay, so what is your analysis of it? What do you believe it is?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, every time you think you can explain it, it gets explained away. What I was going to say is the word Hockomock, and I find it amazing. You were able to say Hockomock, but couldn't say Balzano. That was amazing. The Hockomock means place where spirits dwell, right? Like, in other words, they knew that as a place where weird things were going on. Freetown, they didn't want it, right? They would never go there except for one time during the summer seasons when the settlers, when Plymouth Colony were like, we want this huge part of land. They're like, yeah, sure, take it. We hate it. It's haunted. So even before the settlers got here, then you talk about the Wampanoag, who are in the Triangle. Right before the settlers got here, there was a disease like a flu-type epidemic that wiped out only the areas within the Triangle, right? And the Wampanoag lost a third of their population, whereas the tribes that were around them, which they regularly traded with, were almost unharmed. So there are things that were happening to the Native Americans before we got here, before King Philip's War. Now, do I think that this is the palette, right? And and curses are kind of drawn on it as well. So, for example, I'm a firm believer that the wampum belt is a real story. I believe that the wampum belt needs to be returned for there to be some level of normalcy. However, I think it has a lot to do with, and if you are a practitioner of witchcraft, from anywhere along the spectrum of that, there are certain places, certain times of the year, where your spells are amped up. And I think that goes for curses as well. And so therefore, I think things that might be cast in the Triangle, and I've had people from cults, from witchcraft, from voodoo, from different practitioners of energy tell me that the Triangle makes their spells on steroids. And I think the same thing can be said for curses. And therefore, I'm not saying curses in the Triangle don't exist. I'm saying they're not the reason for everything. They're the juice that makes them even more impactful.
Okay.
This is really totally interesting.
Definitely.
For me, two questions. First one, did they have people that have gone into the swamp and actually never came back? Like they were... Yeah, no.
I think that every once in a while you hear of a story like that, but the more disappearances have happened in the Freetown State Forest.
Okay.
I know this sounds crazy. I think you can't get lost in the Hockomock because you can't get into the Hockomock, right? You're never too far away from some place where okay, I just can't go any further. Whereas the Freetown State Forest, there's all these trails and then the trail ends and it's wait a minute, I'm seeing something kind of over in that area. It's only slightly off the trail. I won't get lost. And so you have lost hikers. But what you also have is where Freetown is, it's in close proximity to Boston, to Brockton, to Providence, Rhode Island, to the Cape, like Cape Cod. And so people commit crimes other places, and it ends at the Freetown State Forest.
Oh, okay. It's a dumping ground then, right?
Right. They abduct someone from Plymouth, and they dump the body in Freetown. And so what you have are a lot of cases of disappearing people that end at the Freetown State Forest. And you'll have police tell you, there's no way we're ever going to solve some of these cases. We're never going to find these bodies. The most haunted place in the Freetown State Forest is this place known as the Assonet Ledge. And the quarry that's there is so far down and so cold that divers can't find stuff. It's so dark. They go down there. Now, I don't know if in modern times, in the last 10, 15 years, they've tried it. I haven't heard of them doing it. But people know that bodies have been dumped there. Snitches have told people, they dumped him in the quarry. They dumped him in the quarry. And they can't find the bodies because it's so deep and dark and cold. So there are a lot of question marks. Stuff happens in a place like Fall River or New Bedford, which are pretty hard cities. People disappear, and then it always seems to end up in the Freetown State Forest, or they are rumored to end in the Freetown State Forest. That, combined with the fact that people get lost there every single year, because if it goes from not very thick to very thick to confusing to everything looking the same, very quickly. So there are more disappearances in the Fall River Freetown State Forest than there are in the Hockomock. Only because I think people can't go into the Hockomock.
Okay. You looks like you have a question from Carrie. Carrie, go ahead and ask your question or comment.
I am wondering if, because of the time of year, the idea that the veil is thinner this time of year until All Saints Day, do you think that is why there are more sightings, for lack of a better term, of paranormal type activity?
Are you talking about just in general or in the Triangle?
In the triangles and in general, but both. Actually.
So I would say there are not many sightings in the wintertime because it's wintertime. But there are just as many things that happen in the summer as in the fall, right?
Okay.
There's just as much activity. So I think now, that said, if we push the paranormal stuff aside, like in my book, it's called Cults, Crime in the Paranormal. What you see is not as much now, but in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, you saw a ton more abductions, cattle mutilations, things like that during this time of the year, and also around satanic holidays, because there were deep ceremonies going on in there. So that traditionally, that kind of activity ratcheted up, but there's stuff always happening in the Triangle.
Any more questions for him or Sean or Jason, Carrie?
But I definitely think, in general, we have these holidays at certain times of the year for a reason, right? Like in other words, we didn't just say, hey, this, and then like the supernatural world conformed to that. I think we place these holidays at times when paranormal activity in general increases. So I would agree with that part.
Well, when I was a kid in northern Pittsburgh, they used to call it a triangle where I lived. You would kind of drive in there and just get lost, and you'd be on a road that took 5 minutes for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You would like disappear. And that always seemed to happen more this time of year.
Really? Now, I was talking about Ocala. I don't know if you caught the beginning of the show, but I was talking about the crazy experiences here in the Ocala forest. And there's someone who lives right down the road from me in this little town I'm in Florida, who has a deep history of paranormal here in Florida. And so we've connected a few times. And I interviewed him for my book, and he has the exact opposite. He says, like, the Ocala, for example, goes dead in October and doesn't like rise and show its face again until March. So it's odd here in this state. It does the exact opposite. It seems, at least in terms of paranormal activity in that place, in that location. But what it does have, which you were talking about, is it does have. And now that I've explored this in the Ocala here in Florida, I look back at some of the stories that I documented in Freetown, and it has what I call the slip, right? Which is a little bit different than a time slip, but it's just things seem to be a little bit off, right? And this goes to the vortex idea you were talking about earlier. The idea that, and now I look back at Freetown, the idea that hunters, right, who GPS everything they do, right? They find a good location, they mark it, other people know it. This rock right here is where I saw the best boar, and blah, 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 and I'm going to come back here. And they go back to that exact location 2 weeks later, and there's no rock there. The location's not there anymore. They go back a week later, and it's there again, right? It just seems as if like things shift, right? Like things slip slightly. And I think that happens more frequently the closer we get to these veiled times that you're talking about, and these celebrations.
Well, thanks.
I'm aware of 2 areas around here.
Thank you, Carrie, for your questions. You have a great night.
Thank you, bud.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
this
Chris,
is very interesting.
what would you say would be like your most intense personal experience, like with all the research you've done, like when you're digging into these things and investigating and stuff like that? Like what struck you the most?
It's crazy. Like, so about about 7 years ago now, I took down Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads. I left the business altogether, kind of thing, and it was, I'm done. Like, I have no place. I felt as if the ideas that I had, the things I were expressing were not in line with what was not necessarily popular, but what was like grabbing people's attention, and their ideas weren't my ideas. And so I came back about 5 years ago. I'm coming up on my 5th year anniversary, deciding to put the investigator to sleep completely and to revisit so much of what I used to do as a legend tripper, right? Okay. So as someone who focuses on experience over evidence, and I don't give a crap whether people don't believe that something happened at some place, because to a folklorist and to a legend tripper, it only matters that people think stuff happens there, right? And so therefore, your personal experience is your personal experience. And just because I can't produce something doesn't mean that a place doesn't have a rich haunted history and that something didn't happen to me, more importantly. Since I've done that, which I feel purified what I do to some degree, like kind of crystallized my intent, I've had more profound experiences than I ever have. So one of the ones that touches my heart desperately, right, is that there's this, so in Tampa, everyone knows Tampa, there's this place called Fort DeSoto, and way too long to get into the entire story of Fort DeSoto. But we went there initially because there was a story of a ghost fisherman, right? A guy who fishes right before you get to Fort DeSoto, who tries to pick up hot chicks, right? And so we were talking about it the other night. I still on my show. We still some remnants here on the board. We tried to get Tinder to sponsor that episode of the show, So we essentially, my partner at the time, absolutely beautiful woman, we're like, we're gonna get you hooked up with a ghost. Like, we promoted it that way, and it was really fun, right? And nothing, spoilers. She didn't get a date. So we were doing more research into Fort DeSoto. We discovered that this was a place of great tragedy. So we went from this like let's hook up, to really discovering the place had just a cloud over it, right? Just a lot of tragedy. And what happened essentially was, it's in friggin' Florida, right? Like, no one wanted to go to this base. Everyone got sick when they went there. They never shot their guns in defense, right? Only to practice. And eventually they're like, we have all this land, we have all this building. We're going to turn into a quarantine. So anyone coming into Tampa would have to go to Fort DeSoto to quarantine if people thought they were sick. Then when yellow fever broke out, the entire place became a yellow fever quarantine, right? And so all of these people died having to do with that. Right? The most intimidating, scary bridge I've ever been on, the Skyway Bridge. If you've ever been to Florida, I don't know if you went over it when you were in Florida. It connects what we'll call the mainland to like St. Pete. It's the most intimidating bridge I've ever been on. And it got hit, and all these people died, and they were taken to Fort DeSoto, which was right across the water, and they were laid out in the hospital that remained from the quarantines, and that was the mortuary for all these people who died there.
Oh, geez.
Oh, wow.
So one story kind of stuck with me, and this story is actually in Haunted Love, because Florida Haunted Love Stories is also about the love of a mother and her children, the love of something that you do that forces you to come back after you're dead to do it. This woman had 6 children, and she, the way the buildings worked were depending on the level of sickness, you were in certain buildings. So someone who was a little bit sick wasn't exposed to someone who was really sick and got it worse. And that was their logic at the time, right? And so 3 of her kids were in the building with her, and 3 of them weren't. And she used to sneak out of her building, and she used to bang on the wall. And one of her sons used to bounce a ball off the wall so that so she would hit the wall, he would bounce the ball off of it. And so her children died without her being able to see them. right?
Oh, my.
And then because of the quarantine area, she got shuffled. I love the fact that you guys don't think that this is just a legend, that you think this is true. That's amazing. I love you guys, right? So
We love you too.
we went there and we were at the foundation of the hospital, and my partner at the time, she just like our angle used to be, she was the one who would ask all the questions, and I would be the one to like, I was the authority or like the expert or whatever you want to say, and that was our dynamic. And then we would go out, and all the stuff would happen to her because she's so sensitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were sitting there, and she had a tape recorder, and we would always document everything with video, pictures, and audio, primarily to get records of everything. But then also, our deal was, if you plug it into the car stereo on the way home and you don't hear an EVP, you don't go searching for it. You know what I'm saying? Like, because we don't care about evidence, but if it's so obvious, like, we embrace it. So she's at the building, and she's just, what her method was just having a conversation. And so she's walking around the foundation. I'm in a different part. I'm a few buildings over. She's walking around the foundations, and she says to the spirit, I'm a mother too. I have 3 children. I know your pain. Like, I know what you experience. I know. I can sympathize with you. I know it. I know your pain. And on the way home, when we listened back to that spot, it was so loud to not even need to be turned up. You hear a voice go, no, you don't.
Oh, jeez.
I'd love to hear that.
We used to jokingly say it was the EVP that ended the show. Until she actually did leave the show, and so then it wasn't funny anymore. But it was that moment where it's not scary, it's not creepy, it's a little bit creepy.
Yeah,
it's
creepy.
It's confirmation, not just only of that someone was there and interacting with you, but the fact that grief exists after death. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that sorrow, that sadness, that's not a psychic recording. That's not you hearing a noise and saying, it says get out. Like, that is a sentence that even the voice itself has such sorrow in it. You have to realize that what we do, whatever level we do it at, is profound, right? And we're touching upon things that don't just have to do with energy or pseudoscience or folklore or psychic connection, but like a smack dab big ball of all of it rolled in together. And so it was one of those moments that every time I think about it, even today, I have to like take a step back and be in awe of what we do sometimes.
Definitely. Definitely.
Oh, wow.
Jason.
Yeah,
Jason.
a lot of great stuff.
I know.
It's in terms of my own experience in the Triangle. If people want to, after they finish the show, Google when Pukwudgies attack. That was probably one of the most intense experiences I've ever had in the Triangle.
What?
When Pukwudgies attack.
Pukwudgies.
What are they?
Pukwudgies.
What are they?
Oh, wow. All right. Okay. So how much time do we have? So
Go for it.
Pukwudgies are, think of them as a troll, right? Think of them as a troll in Wampanoag culture. And if people want to conceptualize Wampanoag, think like Squanto. Think like the people who met with the Pilgrims that very first Thanksgiving, met them like when they landed in Plymouth Rock, all that stuff. That's the tribe we're talking about. They are an element of their folklore, which, like the other stories I was telling you, people were telling me their experiences and asking me to understand, like trying to understand what's happening to them. What are these things that we're seeing? There are these short, usually about between 2 and 3 feet tall, long hair, sometimes hairy, like overall sometimes hairy, elongated nose, who seemed to be walking the woods, and we would stumble upon them, right? So the first 2 experiences that I got, really the first 3 experiences, all follow the same kind of pattern. And the pattern is this. They're in the Freetown State Forest. All 3 of these happen in the Freetown State Forest, but I've documented dozens of these in that area, and then also different parts of the United States. They see this creature. They stumble upon it in the woods. They kind of do a double take, and the thing is gone. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And they wonder, what was that? That's kind of, if you Jenny, you watch the documentary, the infamous "E Want You" experience, people sometimes debate whether or not that's a Pukwudgie experience in the documentary, which I would say yes, because there are different species of Pukwudgies, if you will.
That's a crazy name.
Twist is
No, who would even think of Pudge?
the twist is this, right? If you want, I'll tell you where the name comes from afterwards. So
Right.
the twist is this, right? All three of those experiences, all three of them said they were someplace different days later. And when pressed, they all said 3 days, but that could just be a folklore thing happening in the back of their mind. All three of them saw the Pukwudgie again on at their house, right, or on their turf. One of them woke up to find the Pukwudgie at the foot of their bed, and there was just a staring contest for about a minute, and then there was a noise. She looked back, and it was gone. The second one saw the Pukwudgie. They were waiting for their girlfriend in a car in a parking lot, and the Pukwudgie was just in their rearview mirror watching him, right? And when he looked back, it was actually gone. The third, the woman, once again, Salem's Lot, the woman looked out the window to see the Pukwudgie pressed up against her window. She was asleep on the second floor.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine waking up to that?
All three of them used almost the exact same terminology when describing the experience, or what they were getting was, I got the sense he was telling me to not go back into the woods, and that if I did, he knew where I lived.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Those were the initial three reports I got. And so when I began this research, so now my Pukwudgie research, we're talking 1999, 2000 maybe, there were no references to Pukwudgies anywhere on the internet. They were, except for, they were in a book called The Good Giants and the Bad Pukwudgies. And a guy by the name of Joe Citro referenced Pukwudgies when he was talking about the Dover Demon case. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Dover Demon case.
No.
It's a cryptid case from the 1970s that Lauren Coleman, same guy for the Triangle, happened to be like in the town as it was happening. So it's very well documented. You guys should look that up a little bit later. But he says the Dover Demon is not a Pukwudgie. And I'm like, and I'm friends with Joe Citro. I'm like, boy, you can't throw something out like that and then like not back. What the hell's a Pukwudgie?
Yeah, really.
So finally, using this kid's book, it's literally a kid's book. I was able to use references in there to go back to an older book of folklore, which then led me back to even older folklore and discover that these were something that the Wampanoag had dealt with for hundreds of years in their own society. They were kind of like your typical small creature in whether it's a leprechaun, whether it's a gremlin, they're tricksters, right? They do bad stuff. They're held responsible for anything that goes wrong. That is the worst picture of a Pukwudgie. No,
that's the description.
No, right. And so they and then at some point they turn evil, right? They go from just being jerks to actually kidnapping babies, to burning villages, to we were talking about disappearances early. They were held responsible for disappeared Wampanoag who walked into the woods and never seen again. They were told that they were taken off by, they were captured by Pukwudgies. I've been able to track the Pukwudgie name to different tribes across the country and into Canada. Obviously, every culture has Pukwudgies in them. They're just called different things. The reason I think why Pukwudgies, other than my brilliant writing, I think the reason why Pukwudgies have caught on and have kind of like become this thing on the internet now is because they're called Pukwudgies and it sounds funny.
Yeah.
But the name, what I discovered, I went to Indiana, and Indiana is not only the crossroads of America. Hundreds of years ago, it was a meeting ground for all of these different tribes because it aligned with the mounds that you guys have in Pennsylvania. That is an even worse picture of a Pukwudgie. they were aligned with the mounds. They were all this stuff, and it all centralized on Indiana. And in this park that I was able to go to in Indiana, I was speaking to one of the rangers who happens to have a master's degree in the study of these mounds and their connection to folklore. And their tribes from all across North America would come to Indiana to bury their most sacred dead, right? That's the reason why you hear all these famous Native Americans and stories. They don't have any graves because their most sacred dead were brought to Indiana and they were buried in these burial mounds, which aligned with lunar cycles and solar cycles and all this stuff that's way beyond me to completely understand. And they didn't have a common language, right? So you'd have all these different tribes. It would be like going into the UN and having no one speak anything other than their native language. But they would talk about these stories. And the word Pukwudgie, which was an Algonquin word, so it comes from the Northeast, caught on with now you guys are just messing me with these pictures.
I'm not talking.
And so the word caught on, and it became this umbrella term for little creature that messes with us. And so when I say there are different breeds of them, now the interesting thing about Pukwudgies, and the other reason why I think, and you guys are giving great examples of this in the art that you're showing, it's such, we talked about earlier, right? That we latch onto things that are familiar to us. Small little creature uses ghost lights, which they call taipaiwunkas, to their advantage to draw people. All of these are things we've heard from other kinds of folklore. And so part of the reason why Pukwudgies have shot off is that you can take your imagination and what you think of, and you can put it onto the Pukwudgie in the same way that they were blaming everything on the Pukwudgie 500 years ago. We can put our ideas of what it is. There's no stories, there's no lore, there's nothing in the lore or modern day experiences that describe them as having claws and big teeth and like vicious, right? And yet so much of the artwork has that in it because we romanticize it and we kind of put our fears and our excitement into it.
Isn't it sort of like the children's story where the wild things are?
Well, if you mean in that it's all in his imagination.
That these creatures look like. I'm
with you. Well, if I'm a teacher, it's funny because I actually used that book to teach my 7th grade students how to read analytically. So we did that book last week. Mm-hmm. Those things are huge.
Well, they look sort of like them. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the a kid's imagination of what a monster is translates to us as adults imagining what monsters is. None of the things you showed look anything like a Pukwudgie, but those are artist concepts that they have. They've taken what it does and a little bit of its physical description, and they've made it. So I would agree that there are some common things that we think bad guys should look like, and I think where the wild things are, and gnash their horrible teeth and roll their horrible. I see, like you've got me in teacher mode now. The wild rumpus start. I think that's a really good picture of what we think monsters should be, and I think the thing about Pukwudgies now on the internet, especially, is that they're what we think they look like. But none of those things that you showed actually are. And
these Pukwudgies, they're small, and there was a it was a story. It was a television, like a movie, and these little, it looked like a little native little guy about this high was attacking this woman with his little sword.
Yeah, I think that's a Trilogy of Terror.
Yes.
Yeah. No, these are like the size of small children. They're 3 feet tall.
Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. Are they little alien people?
Now, it's funny you should say that because this goes back to our alien discussion. It goes back to our cryptid discussion. A lot of this stuff is the filter that we have, right? So go back to Chris Pittman, where Chris Pittman at the Assonet Ledge sees UFO sightings. I see ghost lights and taipaiwunkas, right? The lights, they rise from the ground. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a confusion. It's what we see. I have had more than one person who, for years, thought they had been abducted by an alien from their bedroom. read my descriptions and hear some of my stories and read some of my stories about pukwudgies and say, I think it was a pukwudgie in my room that night. And I think like it showed me something else. And now that I think about it, I can remember that I saw something days before in the woods. You know what I'm saying? So I don't, once again, like so much of this stuff, there really is no definitive answer. Are they cryptids? Do you put them in ghouls? Are they supernatural? Are they paranormal? Like they kind of cross everything, which is why so much can get added onto them.
I just want to make a little quick thank you to our second hour sponsor, Carnation. A shout out to you guys. Thank you. This is a great way to start your morning, and it's coming up baking time. Don't forget to get your Carnation milk to make those great pumpkin rolls. Okay, guys? Thanks again, Carnation, for sponsoring our second hour.
Thank you.
You're going to love it in a minute.
Pumpkin rolls.
I don't know. This, seriously, before I was saying, this is like really totally interesting. And I was talking to Russ and Jason about doing a road trip out there.
Yeah.
So
where would you recommend would be the best?
Yeah. What do you recommend us? Because seriously, I do want to go out there because it is so fascinating when I read some of it. So where would we go?
I think the two safest, say question mark, and easiest places to get public access to are the Freetown State Forest and Rehoboth, Massachusetts. In Rehoboth, Massachusetts, you can see the Haunted Horbine School. You can see the Shade Factory Pond. You can see, and you can look for the Red-Headed Hitchhiker. You can see
the Red-Headed Hitchhiker. I want to hear about the Red-Headed
Hitchhiker of Route 44. You can see I can't believe I'm The Rock. I can't believe I could tell you the story about The Rock, but for some reason it's totally blanking me out. But it's the site that ends King Philip's War. Like the surrender happened at this rock. Please, someone in the chat room know what I'm talking about and hop into it, because it's killing me, right? Because it's like I've been there like 27 times and I can't come up with what the name is off my head.
You'll remember it at like 3:00 in the morning.
I will, and then I'm going to call each and every one of you.
All right, brother.
That's a really good location because those are great haunted locations, especially like The Rock. People have gotten really powerful evidence there, right? So if that's your thing, the looking for the Red-Headed Hitchhiker is fun. So it's this kind of combination of great folklore as well and stories that have developed around these places, as well as people have real experiences there. And so you can kind of get caught up in both those things. You can have a great time reading all the stories of a place like The Rock, and then go there and you're like, oh crap, this might be real what people are saying about this, you know?
No, that'd be no problem.
And then the second place, which is more intimidating, would be the Freetown State Forest. And there are places that are easy to get to, like in terms of, you know, a haunted wood where satanic cults have worshipped, sacrificed people. They're places that are easy to get to that, once again, have more modern folklore attached to them, and yet are still very active, and people have a lot of experiences there.
So you said those two were like kind of like
Anawan Rock. I just saved you guys. I'm not going to wake you up. It's Anawan Rock.
Anawan Rock.
Got it. Thank you.
I didn't remember these names, Pukwudgie and Anawana Walk.
Well, you know, it's funny because you've said them 1,000 times. You've been there, and then I in a conversation will be like blah 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 Pukwudgie. Whoa, wait a minute, what's that? And you're like, oh yeah, like not everyone's inside my head. But also, just to end up on Pukwudgies are now so popular they're part of Harry Potter.
No, that's what you should be making. You're a school teacher. Make some Pukwudgie dolls.
Well, I'm not the home ec teacher, but what we do, we're actually right now creating our own folklore and creating our own myths. So I've got half the class creating folklore and half the class creating myths, and I think it's really interesting and kind of connects to what we're talking about, that all of my students who are creating gods, right? So they're working on mythology, they're creating gods. Almost every single one of them.
I thought you said guns.
Well, that too. We had one of those in the district this week. But the people who are creating gods and heroes, but mainly like gods, like Hercules was born Hercules, right? All of their gods have something happen to them, like an origin story. They've watched too many Marvel movies.
Yeah.
All of their, or they're also obsessed with Slender Man and Midnight Man and Blue Baby and all these things.
What grade do you teach?
I teach 7th right now. I just went back to
middle school. Okay.
Yeah, I taught high school. I taught middle school, then I went to high school, and I just came back to middle school this year.
That's nice.
Yeah, and I've got pictures of all this stuff all over the place. So all my students all know what a puck wedgie is.
They all know about your puck wedgies?
although they also can't pronounce my name.
Sounds like something that happens in gym class.
How do you pronounce your last name?
All right, so it's Balls, right?
Balls?
Don't be scared of the balls. It's Balls.
Balzano.
There's
like
no P in it. I don't even know where you were getting a P.
I don't know. I can't talk.
Balzano.
Balzano. Okay.
Because I teach middle school, and it's like, hee. I always have to, like the first day of class, I always say, don't call me Balzano, right? It's like, it's okay. It's balls. Like, embrace the balls. It's fine. And then the last out, and then no one, the rest of the year makes fun of my names or like, anything like, I have the big balls, or anything like that. So I diffuse it the first day of class. I always get to laugh. And I tell everyone else, like, just embrace the balls. It's okay. It's Balzano.
Do you have any like trips that you're going to be planning on going to get more stuff for your books? Because I know you'll probably end up writing a couple more. Do you just come up with it in your mind, or do you go to places and think of the story there?
What happened with the Ocala is I went to this small town, and I think Pennsylvania is a lot like this, right? You've got these big places that everyone knows, and then you've got 1,000 little towns that no one has ever heard of, right? And in Florida, you have the coast, and then you have not the coast, right? So I always say Central Florida to me is not Disneyland this way. Central Florida is this, right? And that is just filled with town after town after town after town that was populated for 50 years, and then for reasons unknown, but usually because of the railroads and resources died up, like it just became a ghost town. So there's a lot of places in Florida that have a weird, creepy feel that are completely abandoned, things like that. And so I was in this small little town right on the edge of the Ocala called Astor. And I was wondering why, like, I didn't even have a book out yet. And this library was coming to ask me to talk to, and I'm like, all right, whatever. I got there. There were like 20 people from the town. All of them not only had a ghost story to tell me about the town, but the other people knew this. Yeah, I know that story. They knew the town. Like, they had all these ghostly legends there. In addition to it, we were taking a picture outside, and it was morning time, right? It was like 11 o'clock. No matter where we took the picture from, we couldn't get light. Right, and it was perfectly light out, and then we'd take a picture, we'd be in the dark. And as we were talking to each other, we kept hearing echoes. We were literally right next to each other, and our voices were echoing just back and forth. And I'm like, something's going on here. Like waves, sound waves, radio waves, audio waves. They're not traveling the same way the way they do in normal places. Something weird is going on. And then I started to notice I was getting a lot of weird stories from the Ocala, and therefore I was like, you know what? This has got to be my next book, because I have a ton of information about all of these little towns, and they're all really weird, and they all point at there's something dark going on in the forest. And so I posted in a Florida history group on Facebook, hey, I'm thinking about writing this Ocala book. And I am not, in 2 days, I got over 1,000 responses of people wanting to tell me their weird experiences there. I had never had that kind of feedback, that kind of immediate, like, you're on the trail of something. So I'm just now finishing up the Ocala book. My next big trip is going to the Florida Keys. Doesn't everyone want to go to the Florida Keys?
I was there.
and I'm probably not going to go far enough to see my good friend Robert, who's in Key
did.
West.
I saw him.
I've seen him twice. Both times afterwards, the two loves of my life left me. So I'm not eager to go see.
Oh, really?
Anytime
Oh,
soon.
wow.
Well, did you ask him for permission to take a picture or anything?
So the first time I met Robert was one of the only times he's ever left Key West. It was in St. Pete. The Ghost Hunters. Ghost Hunters was doing this big conference in St. Pete, and they brought Robert up, and I had no idea who Robert was whatsoever. This is 2008.
Okay.
But I'm like 20 feet away from him with my friend who's got a booth there selling stuff, and people kept walking up to me saying, "Can you take a picture of me with the doll?" And I'm like, "Okay, so this must be a ghosting." And I take a picture, and then they come back laughing. They're like, "Okay, now ask if you could take the picture and take the picture again." And I'm like, "Who the hell am I asking?" They're like, "Ask the doll if you." And this happened to me like 20 times that day before and I'm like, "Oh, I get it." And then it was later that I learned of Robert's rules that you have to say hello to him, you have to ask for the picture, you have to thank him after you've taken the picture, and you have to say goodbye. And if you don't, you're either going to get into a car accident or in my case, lose the love of your life. If you go to see Robert and you've been there, behind him and all around him are just letter after letter after letter.
Oh, that was crazy.
Of people who have had bad things happen to them after they've left Robert, and they write him and say, "Robert, I'm sorry. I didn't say goodbye before I left, and I got into a car accident an hour later. Please forgive me." And
oh my goodness.
like all of this kind of stuff. And these people genuinely believe that their experience with Robert caused bad things to happen afterwards.
It's sort of like a chain letter.
So do you think that do you think it's tied to like a curse from Robert, or do you think like it's just coincidental? What's your opinion?
Okay, so I'm a folklorist, man. It's all real. It's all real. It's okay. So where does the damn doll come from, right? Like there's the story that his grandfather brought it back from Europe and put the clothes.
I've never heard about this doll.
Right. But then that's not sexy enough, man. That's how boring is it to get a present from your grandfather, right? So it's
like 3 foot tall too. It's
right. It's huge. So I like my favorite background story is that his father was having an affair with his nanny, right?
Well, that's a good
Jean's nanny, and the wife found out and made them break it off, and so he fired the nanny, and so she was a voodoo priestess, and she put a curse on the doll, because if we can't blame witches for things, what fun is the world, right? I recently did a show all about the folklore of how we blame witchcraft for anything that happens in our society. Like we're still doing it today, right? I love that story. Now, if you really wanted to nail me down, I would say this dude was mentally ill. Like Gene was messed up. And I think that he created a tulpa himself and put all of his juice and all of his intent into this doll and gave the doll life. You know what I'm saying?
I can see that. I do. I can see that happening. It actually manifested him.
I tell you what, when we went down there, this was just 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I really want to go to this fort and see Robert the doll and everything. And as a paranormal investigator, we take that seriously, very seriously. So
which is not what happens when you take that tour, right?
Right. But I was, I was taking pictures and everything, and I was making sure that I didn't get him in any pictures before I got to his exhibit, and I could ask him for permission.
Yeah.
So we did the whole hello, Robert, asked for permission to take his picture, thanked him, and then we left a donation, for the fort and everything. I mean, so far, I think he left me alone, but I only took one picture too.
So part of the story of that, is that most people, and I love it because like they gave us, I'm like, dude, I don't want your K2. Like, I don't want an EMF meter. And people are like, how does this thing work? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, there must be a ghost. But I think what happens is this. Most people, and if you take a step back, it makes sense. Most people, when they go in there, they want to screw at Robert at first. And so they take a picture because we don't know how long that permission lasts, right? So you take your picture without the permission first, right? And then you ask permission and then you take the picture. Well, when you first get in there, you're excited. You are literally taking a picture into something that's inside of plexiglass from a weird angle with lights all over the place, and then you're worried, and then you get a bad picture, and you're like, "Must be a demon." Like it just doesn't. Then what happens is the initial part of it wears off. You're more calm. You ask, you snap the picture, and the picture comes out normal. So there might be. So I am definitely a fan of the lore of Robert and like everything that story says, except for I don't really believe in the voodoo priestess, but like the rest of that stuff and putting his psychic juice into the doll, I am a total believer in. I don't know if I believe. I'm not going to screw with it, but I'm not sure if I believe as much in the Robert's rules and rules and like. The stuff that's around him now, I don't necessarily believe in as much, but I think that doll was definitely haunted when that guy was alive.
I have no idea who this Robert is.
Well, I tell you what,
Robert did it.
Tell Jenny.
I don't know. I have never heard about
there.
this guy.
So Robert, which despite information out there, is not the inspiration for Chucky at all. Robert was bought, or voodoo priestess backstory. You know the backstory at least. So this 3-foot doll, the little boy gave the doll his name, right? So his name was Robert Jean Otto. He gave the doll Robert, and he took Jean for the rest of his life. Okay. And he would go walk around Key West. Now, Key West is a strange place. You were talking about New Orleans. I call Key West New Orleans Junior. You know what I'm saying? Like it tries to be New Orleans in its feeling, and there are a lot of aspects that are similar to it. So he would walk around, and even for a rich artist family, that's pretty weird to have your kid walk around with this doll all the time. But then things would go missing in the house. Little catastrophes would happen, fires, unexplained fires, and every time they'd say, like, "Gene, what's going on?" He'd say, "Robert did it." Robert
blamed it on the doll.
Yeah. Robert did it. And so it became, and once again, even though that's usual, it's kind of cute when it's like a 6-year-old boy, but now he's like 16 and he's still walking around the streets.
Still walks around with a doll.
Blaming this doll for all these weird things that are going on. People would see shadows in the house, things like that. He goes away. He goes to Europe to become an artist, to go to art school. They put the doll up in the attic. Now people are seeing Robert peering down at times from the attic. The family, the Otto family, is hearing like something running in the attic. Sometimes Robert would be downstairs for no reason whatsoever, right? So Gene comes back with his new European bride, and they move into that house, and the parents move into a different house, which is also said to be haunted. He takes Robert out, and he brings Robert back into his world because he's still obsessed with it. It eats them. It has a special chair in the parlor. When they're sleeping, Robert is sitting up watching them. And once again, all that stuff happens. The wife starts reporting that Robert is moving all over the place. It's here, then it's moved over there. The small fires are occurring. She'll sometimes wake up and Robert will be like in the bed staring at her. And so she says it's either Robert or me. So he finally puts it back to sleep in the attic, right?
Okay.
Same stuff starts happening. Sometimes he appears downstairs. People are seeing him peering down the window. Like all of those things are happening. You can't keep Robert down for too long. Eventually they die. The house goes to someone else.
Jeez.
Written in the sale that they're not allowed to move Robert. And once again, the news people who move in have all these weird fires that happen. They see this shadow like running throughout the house. The doll sometimes will be downstairs, even though the attic is locked. Until finally, that museum, which used to be a fort, buys him. Takes him from the attic. Moves him to this fort. So it's funny that the last time I was in Key West, I talked my way into, my partner and I pretended that we were engaged and we were looking to have our wedding at the artist house where Robert used to live. And just so that we could get this guy talking with us, right? And like,
Yeah.
and then we're like, hey, isn't this where like, wasn't there like some weird doll that was here or something like that? And the guy's like, oh yeah, no. Until finally he's like, nope, you can't go up there. It's an insurance thing. I'm like, all right, dude, just like take the camera and get a picture of the attic for you. And he's like, finally after hours, he's like, do you guys just want to go up there? I'm like, yes, that's why we're here. You know, I might have written a book about Florida love, but I ain't getting married to her. And so we were the first people. Really, me. She didn't end up going because he would just allow one of us. I was the first person in the attic that didn't own the house since Robert had been moved. And so it was really cool.
Wow.
Nothing ghostly happened, but you're sitting there going like, wow, like this is the birthplace of probably, I always call him he's the paranormal rock star. Like this is the birthplace of the of the myth of one of the most famous ghost stories in Florida. And I'm just here, and of course I'm coughing because it's filled with dust. So, but it was a beautiful moment nonetheless.
I tell you what, man, when I took his picture, like when I was in that room, you know, the exhibit and everything, I was fine. But when I went to go take his picture, like I just had like the worst case of chills like I've ever experienced.
You know, explain to me. So when you go see this little doll, they have roles.
He's big.
Oh, this big doll. They have roles that you can do because if you don't, you'll die or you get.
Yeah. So
cursed. Yeah.
when you enter the room, when you enter the primary room, you have to say hello because that's only polite anyway, right?
Yeah.
You have to say hello to the doll. You have to ask to take Robert's picture. You have to thank Robert once you've taken the picture. And then you have to say goodbye to him when you leave. Or you have to say thank you for letting me come visit you. One or the other. Either way, it's lady's choice. And if you don't do those things, people believe bad things happen to you.
Wow. I don't think I'd want to go see him.
Yeah, seeing some of those letters that were there, you know, it was really crazy to see. Like people were like, "Oh, I unwillingly by accident, you know, got him in the background on a picture," and then just chaos ensued shortly after.
Oh my God!
You know?
Yeah.
And my thing was, we drove down there, you know, so it was 21 hours down or whatever. You know, it's like, well, I don't want to take any chances.
Yeah, like I believe it enough that I'm going to say thank you, brother. I love you before I go. Right?
I don't think I'd want to talk to him.
So Key West is a great haunted destination for anyone. Like there's so many really good ghost stories, and like New Orleans, a lot of their ghost stories have to do with alcohol. So it's like bars and stuff you can go to leading into it. But the Keys, like people think of Key West or the Keys, they think of only Key West. But there's a whole string of islands that lead down. The most recent show I did. What I was talking about was the hurricane of 1935, which essentially wiped out over 500 people in the Keys, specifically in one area of the Keys. And there are all of these haunted legends that are attached to that really horrific time in history, and which is only like a 3-day period. And I want to go to all of them. So like that's my really big tour. You know, just to kind of summarize what it is. You have over 500 people who died, right? Some of which have never been found, right? They've never been discovered. They just assume that they were lost at sea. Every once in a while, someone in this part of the Keys will be diving and they'll find a body underneath or like attached to the coral or buried underneath like a tree, like the swamp trees that are down there and things like that. And I'd be like, oh,
those are cool.
From 1935. And they'll bring the body up and they'll add another number to it. So World War II, World War I, horrific. The vets come back and the government owes them money, right? And they're like, we don't have any money. So what they did was they sent them out for work, right? So that's how they could pay the vets their money. So all of these, like thousands, I should say, of World War I veterans were shipped down to Florida to help to reinforce the railroad, which ran from Miami. Actually, technically, it ran from St. Augustine and Jacksonville down to Daytona, down to Miami, and then over what is now, which is where you drove, the 7 Mile Bridge Highway, right?
That was neat.
So that all used to be a train track.
Oh, wow.
The storm wiped out all of those worker camps. So in addition to the residents that were normally living there, these World War I vets who were actually like, they were in tents. They were in like lean-tos. Like there was no support. The storm hit so quickly. They were like, well, there's nothing. One of my favorite things is one of the people who was predicting the weather was a priest in Cuba. And they asked him, well, what should we do to protect these people now that the storm is coming? And he went, I don't know, pray. All these people got wiped out. But then you're talking like this is in the middle of the ocean. Like it's not that close to land. So they put a ban on shipping the bodies out. So they were under orders to round up the bodies of these people who had died and burn them and cremate them on site.
Oh, wow.
So you have electrical storms, right? You've got sudden death. You've got horrible tragedy. You've got misplaced bodies that were burnt, regardless of what their religious ideas were. You mix that and like the mythology, the legends and the folklore that comes out of this event in that area. It's just I've been dining on it for the last 2 weeks, and that's there's like at least five locations I've attached to this story, and so I'm dying to. I don't know if the whole thing would make a book in and of itself, but that's definitely something I'm looking to explore.
That's great.
I tell you what, the key lime pie down there is awesome.
Yes, and every place makes their own, so you can under the pretense that you want to try all the different kinds, you can eat like 87 different kinds of key lime pie, and they're all
amazing.
different.
Well, it was great having you with us tonight, Christopher. Where can someone learn more about you and your books?
The radio show is called Tripping on Legends, so wherever you get podcasts, you can download Tripping on Legends. TrippingOnLegends.com is the main website, but to be honest with you, Facebook.com/Tripping on Legends is probably the best place. That's where everything gets dumped into from the Instagram and from the Twitter. All ends up in the Facebook. So that's probably the best place to go. Facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. And then of course, any of my books, I've got 9 of them out. Any of them can be bought at Amazon.com, or if you're in the Bridgewater Triangle area, you can get them in your bookstores, or if you're in Florida, you can get, other than that, you can get them online wherever you get your books.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us tonight. It was great to have you. It was a
Thank you
pleasure.
very much for having me, guys. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Well, that was interesting.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Well, we ran out of time we were going to talk about the No Face Gray, but we'll save that for next week. Maybe we can get a couple guests on about that, the documentary.
That'd be cool. That was a freaky documentary, huh? That blew me away.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's kind of I kind of believe it. You know, like we talked, I believe it.
Right.
I believe it was. I don't believe it was a ghost. I think it was a gray that they actually caught. We're going to talk about that next week because we ran out of time. Any final thoughts on this, guys? On tonight's show?
That was a good one.
I'm just impressed.
Very informational and
very, very.
You know, if anybody local's not busy this weekend, you know, we'll be up at the Bigfoot UFO Paranormal barbecue up in Dayton, Pennsylvania.
And what are you going to talk about?
We're going to give a presentation about paranormal experiences, you know, how to help people, you know, talk about equipment and different things to get people started into it, and do some questions and answers, and, you know.
Are you going to have any evidence to show them?
Yeah. I got 2 computers. I got to get everything down to one big flash drive and get all that ready.
And what we're planning on doing too is when we're on stage, we're going to
dance,
Facebook Live it.
We're going to dance together,
I can do that.
Yes.
We're going to Facebook Live.
We are.
That's cool. I like to watch it.
Yeah, we'll have to send you what time we're.
I'd like to see. I want to see you do the 2-step.
Oh, no 2-step. It's the Irish jig, honey. That's where I go.
I see Torture Saturday on the horizon.
Oh no, it is not going to be torture. It's going to be a day.
Is it Saturday? Is it Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, it's this Saturday.
I hope you have nice weather.
What was the? I can't think of the name of the campground it's at now. All of a sudden.
How far away is it from Pittsburgh?
It's like an hour and a half. So it's right in.
Yeah, it's about an hour for me. Yeah. Did you ever hear of Vandergrift?
Yes.
Okay, it's not about a half hour up from Vandergrift.
So
we'll post it on the Facebook page.
Yeah, I want to watch your presentation.
Oh boy.
Oh no, that'd be fun. See, I could see that. I would be I would be upset if you didn't. Yeah, and then we're gonna. So that's what we'll do, Jason. We'll two-step on the freaking stage.
Yeah,
Just for
two
Jenny,
step
man.
together and talk about ghosts.
Yeah,
We'll
and
pretend
have
like we're
fun.
dancing with ghosts. How about that?
I'm gonna go to the Renaissance Festival. I'm
Oh,
gonna wear a bustier and
Oh wow, that's cool. You gonna
find
eat
me a
a turkey
native.
leg?
Is that
Find
the
me
You
a
can eat
nice.
is that the one in New Stanton?
Yeah, I'm gonna find myself. I like the. I want to find myself a pirate.
There you go. That'd be good. Take pictures. Are you going to get a turkey leg? Are you going to have a turkey leg?
I'm
for
not
that?
really into the turkey legs.
Yeah,
No?
but it's healthy. It's turkey.
Nah, I just like to. What do I get there? I don't even know. Do we even get food?
Oh, they got that
Kettle
road
corn.
construction right there. Ugh, what a nightmare.
Kettle corn.
Yes, kettle corn is delicious.
Then I'm gonna go Friday night. I'm gonna go to they have a Penn Township festival. I'm gonna do that Friday night and Saturday night because they have bands and stuff. Yeah. So,
That's great.
Come up
Yeah,
to the
it's fun.
barbecue
Yeah, come up
on
there.
Saturday.
Dayton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, or come investigate with us on Friday.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Where are
we-
you investigating?
We have a private
In
investigation.
Where?
Yep. And Vandergrift.
Yeah.
Are you
right
having an
Friday night.
investigation there and you're going to go back on Saturday to Vandergrift?
Yeah, we're
No,
just
no,
gonna
no.
get a hotel.
I'm
Yeah,
confused.
that's a lot of driving. No, we have a
Yeah, no,
private
no.
investigation on Friday in Vandergrift. And then we're just going to stay up there, and then because we have to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and it's an all-day event. So we're not sure what time we'll be speaking, but looking forward to it.
That sounds
me
like
too.
fun.
Yeah,
It
Maybe
is.
you'll see Bigfoot.
barbecue and ghosts and Bigfoot.
Okay. We're going to look for UFOs too, Jenny. We are.
Yeah.
We're going to look for UFOs and Bigfoot.
I got
We're going to investigate it.
I got my roll of aluminum foil. ready to make
Seriously,
my
there's
hat.
a lot of UFO sightings
Yes.
again. I can't wait till
Yes.
they come. I'm going to say,
I-
come pick me up. Take me out of here. I can't stand it anymore. Seriously,
Oh,
I hate it here. I just wish that the aliens would come down and blow us up.
Be careful what you wish for.
Be careful what you wish for, honey.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
I would like to get. I would love it as long as
'Cause
they.
how do we all know that they're friendly? They might.
Well, they are. They're not. They're
We don't know
friends.
that for sure.
They're not really friendly. They're just they're like Ashtar.
The
pick you
commander.
Ashtar
goes.
command. Pick me up, Ashtar.
They'll be
Yes,
experimenting on
yes,
you
yes.
without any anesthesia.
Oh, Ashtar. How about she was so funny.
Ash-
He's so
What was her name?
handsome.
Yes. What was
Ashtar
her
is
name?
so handsome with his long blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
And his
Jason, you weren't
uniform.
on for that show, buddy.
No.
That was a wild one. That just blew me away. This woman
Ashtar.
actually.
Who did that? Who said that? Who wrote that?
Oh
Ashtar.
man.
Who wrote that? Who wrote that in the chat? Was that Joe? Ashtar command. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot
All
of
I know
Looney
is
Tunes.
that was a creepy show.
Astar Command. Nice.
Well, I actually enjoyed it because I was watching Amazon Prime and it was telling you how you can communicate with these people and you sit and you go into a deep meditation and you can start communicating with them like whatever. Come to me,
There you
Ashtar.
go.
So
Come.
sleepy.
Oh, God.
Well, I listen to meditation to put me to sleep. As soon as I go, I put on all kind of weird stuff. Last night I listened to campfire, like crackling fire.
Yeah.
Did it work?
The only thing was it was so bright in my room. My dog Ava didn't like it. So I had to flip the phone. No, Ava sleeps with me. She's so funny. She's so the dog weighs 90 pounds.
Oh boy.
And she flips her legs up. You know how dogs do, they have their legs up in the air.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was laughing my ass off because she was on top of me. I couldn't
yeah.
move. She took up half the bed. It's like,
You
oh my
enjoyed every
gosh.
second of it.
I love my dog.
Yeah,
I
my
love
dogs
sleeping
too.
with her. I'd rather sleep with my dog than a man. Sorry, I do. I love
Oh
my she's no, he's just more
Oh.
guys, well, they just hit you in the nose, but she does too.
Oh man.
And she
Ow.
snores. Her feet are huge.
Uh-huh.
She's more cuttable.
Oh.
You know, she's
Oh, my
soft and
God.
furry.
Mhm.
And she snores
Okay.
really loud. Bestiality.
Skeleton,
Ew.
yeah, skeleton
Who wrote
came out of the
that?
closet today.
Who wrote that? Who wrote that? Was that,
Oh.
is that Joe? That's disgusting.
Was it Joe or Augie?
No, it's from Paranormal. So it must be Joe. Oops, I just. Okay. It's a little trouble. No,
Okay.
that's sickening. That's don't
It's
go there, my dog.
time.
What time
it's
is it? Is it time to go? I can't even see anymore. I'm
yes.
losing it because I'm so tired. Okay, let's
It's
go.
the witching hour.
Bye.
Yeah, it's
Well, thank you.
10:57.
Thank you for tuning in to Chasing Prophecy. Next week we'll talk about No Face the Grays. We'll make sure we get in because we don't have a guest for next week, I don't believe. So we'll
Okay.
get one for that. Okay, guys, thanks again for tuning in to
Thank you,
Chasing
everybody.
Prophecy. It was great. It
Take
was
care,
fun.
everybody.
You have a great
See you later.
night.
Bye-bye.
Let me put the ending on because I can't find it. Uh-oh, where'd it go? Okay.
Oh, no.